Hello everybody. Let's tidy that up out the way. Okay, let's make sure we've got the camera so we can see what's going on. And tidy that away. So I've been busy dyeing all morning, so I'm just in the middle of rinsing the fibre that was dyed this morning and getting that hung up out of the way. Let's see if we can do some fiddling here to give you all a better view. May or may not work. That might do. That's better. Okay, we need to find our pictures for our inspiration dyeing this morning. As ever, if you've got anything that you want to ask about, you can stick it into the chat section, and I'll try and keep an eye on it and answer them if I possibly can, or we'll refer you on to here's where you can go to find out the information. Usually I have to go quite carefully and do a really thorough tally of all the things that people have voted for the colours that we're going to be dyeing, but this time I didn't need to add them all up very carefully because there was an overwhelming favourite that you could just pick out even by going, oh yeah, that's the comment that everybody said most of, rather than needing to count that precisely. So we're going to be dyeing the colourway for the next month's seasonal changes pack called Bird's Nest. The Cambrian wool went into soak yesterday, so I'll bring it round so that you can see. It's that colour palette. So as ever, the webcam footage of my phone screen isn't entirely great for colour representation, but it gives you an idea about what we're working towards. So we've got icy blues, aquas, browny colours. So yeah. Now the issue is going to be with this one. So before I start dyeing, I always tend to have a quick look and go, what's going to be the hardest part about this one? Dyeing a blue that's pale enough is always challenging, because blue is such a strong dye colour. So when you want to dye these very, very pale blues, you need practically no dye. And the other issue is that the two mid-toned blue colours are both going to be colours that I need to make using turquoise. And turquoise, as somebody discovered when they were doing the online dyeing course, and there's a link to that, sign up to that in the description if you fancy having a go at learning how to dye fibre. And this particularly happens with fibre rather than yarn, is that turquoise requires a higher temperature in order to form a good stable bond with the fibre. And that is a different temperature to lots of the other colours of dyes. So when you make up mixtures of colours that use turquoise, the other colours will strike onto the fibre first, and the turquoise has more time to sort of migrate its way through the fibre and mix. So that quite often leads that you end up with a certain amount of kind of chroma, with the turquoise being more visible. I don't mind it personally. I think it's quite a pleasing effect, but it's always something that I have to bear in mind when I'm dyeing these semi-solid sorts of colours, is that that's something that can be a possibility that will happen. But we're going to be working a lot with the blues, the turquoises, browns and yellows today. So let's get this show on the road. If anybody was here last month, you will notice me saying that my notebook is completely full. We're now on to a new notebook, which will be backwards for you, but it is the Book of Magical Thinking, which was a Christmas present gift. So I thought that was an appropriate notebook to swap onto using. So let's write down what we are doing, because it's nice if my notes are somewhat legible when I come back to refer to them later on. Unlike the other one, it doesn't have a plastic cover, which might mean that it falls apart quite quickly, but it's not got anywhere near as many pages, so it's not going to be in use for quite as long. Right, let's start off with that very palest blue. So again, anybody who's been around any of these sessions before will know that partly these colours are mixed on what I know these dyes will do, but also we do test them out as we go along. And for that, I've just got a piece of kitchen roll just to give me something to put the dies onto so that I can see what we're doing. Let's grab some jugs so that we can pull off the small amount of colour that we need for dyeing just 100 grams. So my studio is set up for dyeing bigger quantities rather than small quantities like these packs. So we kind of have to do a little bit of adaptation. Right, the first one, which is, it's called Quench Blue on the little colour swatch. I don't know why it's called Quench Blue. I've said that it's called Ice Blue. And that one, I think I'm going to make using the warmer toned blue, which is like a royal blue. What does it want in with it? Doesn't want any blacks, that's too purple toned. But it needs something, it needs more than just, let's try some olive green. Okay. We've got our small syringes because we're going to want next to no dye for this. Particularly of the blue. So this is like an olivey kind of green colour, and I'm hoping it's just going to take the edge off this primary blue. So let's try 3 of you. And this will be, you'll see what I mean about this blue being so intensely strong. I'm actually going to use more green than I am blue. So let's go for 1 of the blue. I'm trying to be quite precise because these small quantities, you don't need very much dye in order for it to change colour. And that's kind of really... That's really annoying for repeatability. Right, let's add some water into this because we need to dilute the colour down. And then we're just going to take a dot of that and put it on there. And we've ended up with something, it's maybe a little bit on the green side compared to the image photo, but I think it's going to work quite well. So I'm going to stick with that because I'm not sure that I'm going to end up with something I'm happier with. And I think it's also going to look a little bit more blue when it's been heat set as well. So let me write down what I did. 3 olive, 1 royal. Okay, because that means that when this first batch of packs sells out, I can make more of them until the end of March. Right, that's the palest blue done. Let's carry on and tackle the rest of the blues. So we've got the next swatch down in the image, which is called Cooled Blue. So it's that one. I've sort of described it as being more of an aqua colour. It's on a similar vein to the colour that we've just dyed, but I'm going to start off by dyeing it with a different base. So I'm going to take some of this dye, which is a jade colour. Now, by itself, this is a really, really intense jade green. It's much too vibrant for what we want. So when we look at that aqua colour, it's got a lot of green tones in it. It's not very dark. I'll only need maybe only about 5 millilitres of this. And then in terms of what to put in it, I maybe want to make it slightly bluer and slightly muddier. So I'm going to go for 2 different options here. We're going to have some of this one, which is a grey, but it's a very blue toned grey. And some of this, which is a very cool toned dark brown. Let's have a couple more jugs. So we are going to do this is one of the syringes that's worn out. Eventually these syringes get worn out and they no longer pull up measurements accurately. You're broken. And for some things it doesn't matter, but where I'm measuring precise quantities, it matters a lot. Right. So that's 5 of the jade. So these are all stock solutions that have got concentrated amounts of the dye powder in them, and all we're doing is we are making them up in smaller quantities and diluting them down to go onto our fibre. So let's go for 1 of the brown and 1 of the grey. Again, this is going to need water going into it because it won't be going onto our fibre. That little dye would not spread far enough. And my phone has switched itself off. There we go. Okay, that's where we've ended up with. So it's different enough to our original colour. It matches the general vibe of the picture that we're going for. So I think that's another one that's going to be a winner. So let me write that down. And I can do these quite quickly now because I know these sets of dyes quite well because I use them day in, day out. This is the usual thing of practice makes perfect, and I do a lot of practicing. So if you're trying to do this sort of thing at home with any of your own dyeing, and it takes you far longer, it gets much easier as you do more and more of this sort of thing. The other thing is that as you develop your own, the more you dye, the more samples you keep, the easier it is to go, oh, hang on, that colour just darker, or that colour but a little bit greener, or that colour but a little bit yellower. And you start to get a real sort of, particularly if you've kept a good recipe book. I think my recipe book has long disappeared into with the samples. I used to have one, and as I've gradually changed the dyes that I've used, and it's gradually become so outdated that I kind of looked at it when I did the studio rebuild and just went, I don't use you anymore. I never look at you. So I got rid of it and went, and I just kept the sample sheet that I use when I go out and teach dyeing in person, which is a really basic, here's what all these dyes actually look like on fibre. Anyway, enough of my blathering on. The next one down is a colour that on the inspiration picture is called Turkish Tile. I've sort of described it as being a dark turquoise, which is going to be, I think, do I want to start off with that colour? I'm going to go, let's have some turquoise. So that's 50 of our turquoise, and I might just add other colours to it because this is actually going to be one of our darkest tones. So when I'm putting together these mixed colour packs, it's always about thinking, how do I combine the colours in the inspiration picture, the general feel of them, but also make sure that they are nice and useful for us to use in colour work and things like that. And for that, we need difference in tonal values. We need difference in the intensities of colour. So it's no good all the colours in the pack all being really pale, or them all being really dark, or them all being mid-tones. We need variety. Now, this isn't a pack with any really super dark colours, but I still need to make sure there are some dark shades in it. Otherwise, these 3 turquoisey, bluey, greeny colours are all just going to blend into each other, and to the point that when you come to actually look at them from a distance, they might as well be all the same shade. So it's always about trying to make sure that you are thinking not just about whether it's red, yellow, green, blue, purple, or whatever, but also how strong, how intense, how dark a colour it is. So that's our turquoise that's gone into there. We now need to have a think about what else we put in there, because by the turquoise, The turquoise by itself is really, really intense blue. It's not right for what we want. So let's add in some of the grey. So let me write this down because there's going to be quite a few different colours going into this. My handwriting's appalling today. So that's had some of the grey, which will just take the intensity off the colour. So this grey is a very blue toned grey, but it does just muddy the colours down a little bit. It also had some of that same olive green that I used in the original shade. And I'm going to try it first without adding any of the brown, because the brown in particular splits out from the turquoise really quite badly. And that's given me 50, 60, that's given me about 70 millilitres of dye, which is kind of just about okay to put on without needing to add any dilution. But that's the kind of colour we've ended up with. That's a little bit darker than it will end up looking, because wet dyes always look darker than when they actually dry out because of the way the light reflects off them. But we can see we've got that difference in tonal value that we actually need. So that's given us 3 different shades of turquoise. The next thing we've got to do is our 2 different shades of browny type colour. So I've already taken some of the brown off, and both of these browns have both got some yellow in them, but one is slightly warmer than the other. So let's start off with the paler version. Remember, if you miss anything, then the live streams, they get recorded automatically to watch back later. So you can always sort of come back and go, what did she do there? So I'm starting off with the paler one. So I've just used 10 of this shade of quite a cool tone brown. It doesn't have very many reddish shades in it. It's kind of almost like a true brown. But in this case, I think it needs some yellow in. And I'm going to go for... I'm going to go for this one, which is the cool toned yellow, which is a lemon yellow, and there's 25 of that. Now, how much do I want of you? Let's start off with a 50-50 mix, see where we are, and I can always add more, because that's the nice thing about doing this. You can always go back, put more dye in if you think it needs it. So we'll dilute this one down again, because remember, this is one of our paler colours. Have a look there. So that's our brown with our yellow that's gone in it. And what's that made? It's made something that is a little bit too olive green. It's actually lacking a little bit of the warmth that we need for these colours. It's a nice, I like the colour combination, but it's not quite right for the tones that we've got going on in the inspiration picture. It's just going to need a tiny, tiny hint of either red or orange, or it might be that I swap to using the red toned brown, but I think that's going to be too red. Let's pull off. Do I want red or do I want orange? Red. Let's go for red. And sometimes there's kind of no right answer. You can go about, you can make the same colour in a lot of different ways once you start making complex mixtures. So we're not going to use very much of this red. Just put 1 millilitre of it in. Let me write down what I've just done. And let's have a look and see how much that's changed it, and whether we want another milliliter of red. So I'm going to bring this round so it's closer, so hopefully can you see. So that was the original colour with just the brown and the lemon yellow, and that's just by adding 1 milliliter in of our red dye. So it's just shifted it into being something that's closer to a yellowed brown rather than something which is an olive green. and I'm happy with that as a good mix for what we want. So let's put that over to one side, and we've then got our final colour to mix, which is the one that's kind of a thatch brown. It's been described as. It's really quite, that does have some more olive tones in it, so it might be that that is a form of the brown and the lemon, but it won't need the red to go into it. Have I managed to use every single container that I have? Not quite. Nearly. Nearly. In fact, one, two. So that's 75 millilitres of this dark brown. So these are bar optics that the stock solutions are set up in. So they're reasonably, well, they are very accurate, because the spirits that are sold have to be, they have to match a certain legal measurement. So at the scale of 25 millilitres, there's very little error in those, providing you use them right. Okay. So there should be, I pulled out 25 from there. Sorry, it was a 25 millilitre measure and I pulled out 10. So I've just pulled it up to check, and there is 15 left in there of the lemon. Let's see if that's enough or if I want any more. So again, this one I'm not going to dilute, because it's going to be about the right quantity for us to use. So I'll bring it round again so you can see closer on the webcam camera. So this is the dark brown that we've just made. It's probably darker than the actual little colour swatch, but I think it's giving us a nice dark to work with. It's not giving us something that's too similar in tonal value to either of the blues. So even though it's not quite right, I think it's the right. I think I'm going to deviate. I don't think it wants any more yellow in, because the other thing that I also know from working a lot with these dyes is the yellow tones become more dominant as things get heated up and the heat setting process happens. So that's going to be right there. Right, let me have a brief tidy up so I've actually got space to work, so I don't end up putting the wrong thing on some fibre. So none of these leftover bits go to waste. They'll all get used on some fibre at some point in time. That's just water that can go out of the way. That's just the spoon. That's the measuring phone thing. Citric acid, dyes. Wonderful. Okay, so we're now ready to start putting some dyes onto our fibre. So the fibre's been in soak overnight, and it's just had some water with a little bit of washing up liquid. I've actually finished the ovens, I've run the oven all morning, and everything else that I'm dyeing today has already been heat set. So these are actually going to go into the microwave, because it's a more energy efficient way. Yeah, so it's a more energy efficient way of dyeing these smaller batches than heating up the big oven. It works really well actually for the smaller amounts. So this is only 500 grams, and I'll end up, this will be two loads in the microwave, and it won't take that long. Certainly use less electricity than heating up the entire oven. So what I usually will do is I'll split it into the two different batches. So we've got the brown tones and the blue tones. And that way, if we have any disasters, we won't end up with the pale brown fibre ending up being turquoise blue. So this is our darkest turquoise. So, and because it's cold, you can be quite rough with the fibre. So providing you're not rubbing it, I'm just squeezing it. So it's had most of the water squeezed out. And I'm just trying to get a nice, even spread of dye throughout the fibre. I'm happy with a little bit of variation in these packs. I think that's what makes them hand-dyed fibre as opposed to commercially dyed. But at the same time, they need to not be too uneven. Okay, let's have a look at you. Rinse my hands off. So I always put the citric acid on right at the end, just because that's my work habit. Because for nearly everything that I dye, that's the technique that works much, much better for me. Because particularly if you're dyeing things with silk that suck up the dye very quickly, it means that you can move the colours through the fibre nice and evenly. So that's our citric acid just going on. You don't really have to move that around too much, because it will have just made the general condition of the fibre acidic enough for the dye molecules to bond onto the wool, which is what we want. And then it's being wrapped up nice and tightly. So I always dye fibre with a low water method. You can do high water methods, but I find they never make fibre that is as nice to spin, because the dye has to get up to sort of 85, 90 degrees in order to make a good bond. That's centigrade, by the way. And that's very close to the boiling point of water, and fibre just doesn't like that level of agitation. And it also minimises the amount of water that I need to use. So because we're not on mains here, we're on a spring. And while in winter there is lots of water, in summer it can start to get a little bit sort of thinking about what water we use, and trying to make sure that we don't run our spring and our storage tanks dry. Particularly once we start to have to water the garden in real hot spells. So this is our next colour. So we're just going for nice spreading around of the fibres. The paler the colours, the easier it is to kind of end up with a nice even coverage in a way, because you don't get the same contrasts between the dark sections and the light sections. But equally, once you get down to really not very much dye, you can start to really struggle to kind of have enough dye there to actually really make an impact. So that's our citric acid again. And sometimes, particularly with these turquoise dyes, you put the citric acid on and it changes colour, then you get a bit freaked out. And then you heat it up and it goes back to being the colour it was before you added the citric acid. So that's another one of the reasons I don't put citric acid in my stock solutions, because it can make some colours seem a bit deceptive. They're a little bit pH sensitive, maybe. I don't entirely know the science behind it, but I do know that when you add citric acid, some dyes change colour. I'm right on the end of this roll of cling film. Which is why it's being a little bit of a pain to roll out, and the box has reached the point where the roll is no longer held in place, so it's kind of a little bit of a pain. I used to feel really guilty about the amount of cling film I used, and then I realised that a 300 metre box like this will last me dyeing on a professional basis for 3 or 4 months. and then you see the footage of like the behind the scenes of the factory programs, and you watch the quantity of cling film that's being put around pallets and things, and just go, you know what, there's lots of little things that I can do to help, but until we've addressed the issue of the quantity of plastic that big business is using, and until there's a better option actually on this sort of scale to produce really high quality fibre, I'm okay with that amount of plastic usage, because fundamentally the problems are elsewhere in our society, rather than with somebody running a small business who does lots of other packaging, recycling, and reusing, and trying to make sure that everything else that goes out is as unwasteful as possible. So I no longer feel too guilty about it. There are now some plant-based cling film options that do exist, but one, they're eye-wateringly expensive, which, given the cost of everything is going up. I've just had an email from the accountants going, really sorry, but your accounting software is going up in price again for the second time in a year. And not by a few pence, it's by a couple of pounds a month. And it might not sound like a lot, but that's kind of the story of almost every single thing at the moment. If nothing, everything is more expensive. The software that I use to run the online shop, that's increased in price. So there's kind of nothing for which it feels like I'm not paying more at the moment. So I'm kind of wary about swapping over to something else which costs yet more money, and I don't yet know if it works because I've yet to manage to get hold of anyone to try it. But yeah, at some point we might get hold of a roller for use in the house, and at which point I'll steal a bit and try it out for dyeing fibre and see what happens. But at the moment, we're still working our way through the roll that came out of a house clearance from somebody's mum who died, and I went and it was a friend, and I went and helped her sort of clear the house because it was being sold literally that weekend, and everything needed emptying out. And she must have bulk bought cling film at one point in time. And this is 7 or 8 years ago now, and we are still using all of that up. So okay, so this is one of our brown shades. I've done the 3 turquoise shades. I'm looking at the 2 turquoise shades, and I'm hoping that they are different enough in colour, because at the moment they look worryingly similar, even though on the test piece they look different enough. But in this case, what I tend to do is I'll wait until they've been heat set, and I'll wait until I've rinsed them and put them through the spin dryer to pull out most of the liquid before I make a decision about the colours. And if they're too similar, then I'll just put some more fibre into soak and just dye and develop probably the mid-tone. The one that I made using the jade and the brown and the green might be not quite dark enough, so it might be that I'll just tweak that recipe and increase the quantity of dye slightly to make it a better mid-tone. But we'll see. Right, so that all goes onto the compost heap, and we need a fresh roll, which annoyingly is in the brand new box. If anybody wants to disappear at this point, we probably have reached the end of the truly interesting content. If you don't want to sit and watch me do battle with a cardboard box, I won't be offended. I thought there might be enough to get this batch done, and there was. But we were one short. Right. You can come out. Let's just put you down there for now. Right. Open you and open you. go. Right, one last piece. So that, I think, was the paler shade of brown. So I've just got the darker shade of brown left to put on the fibre. And then this lot can go and be heated up to make the dye form its permanent bonds onto the wool. Go. And then while I'm doing that, I'll be cracking on with getting the rest of the fibre that was dyed this morning rinsed. So I've just done another big batch of the Superwash Superfine Merino in some variegated colours. So part of that is rinsed, but not all of it yet. So it all gets washed in hot water and washing up liquid and detergent. And then it all gets rinsed in hot water as well. And then it's hung up to dry. And hopefully the weather's really nice and dry at the moment. So hopefully it will dry without needing to turn on the dehumidifier. And there should be a shop update ready tomorrow or maybe Thursday. I've already got some bits photographed and gone in the shop. And then while I'm waiting for the water heater to heat up another tank of water, I'm also getting on with some new warps. So I've got some new base yarns that have just shown up. So one of them is a Polworth Yak Silk and it's lovely. So this is what we've got. I'll bring them over so closer so you can see. So that's our dark one. These are the two that I'm a little bit worried about. I'll make a judgment on once I've heat set them and rinsed them and see them dry. These are our two brown colours. So yeah, so those are ready. Those are ready to be microwaved, ready to be heat set, and we'll see what they come out like. So yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed that insight into the development of the colours for this month's seasonal changes packs. As I say, hopefully this will be ready tomorrow. It will depend on, one, how well things dry, and two, whether I need to re-dye one of those turquoisey aqua colours, whether I have to go back and get one dyed today, or whether it will end up being done on another day. But we shall see. It may be all right. I may be worrying unnecessarily. I've sort of do these sessions as a talking along with what I'm doing rather than necessarily teaching you how to do things. And the link to the online fibre dyeing course is in the description, so that you can have a go at doing that on fibre if it's something you'd like to explore more. But apart from that, keep an eye on the shop for if you like that colourway, and they will be coming up soon. And the April colours will be going up in the Fellowship of Yarn towards the end of the month for you to vote on what we dye next. It's always interesting to see what colour choices you decide you'd like to go for. I think there's a few left from the couple of previous months if you missed out on those from the other ones. I hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon, and I shall see you all soon.